Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I am your host, Benedikt. If you are new to the show, welcome. If you are already a listener, welcome back. Appreciate you. If you are not aware, this is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all your common podcast platforms, but also on YouTube. So wherever you're discovering this, make sure to pick your medium of choice. And in this case, YouTube might be the way to go, because this is an interview we've done at Studioszene event last week in Hamburg. And so at the time of recording this little intro here, it was last week. So we went to this trade show, audio industry event, and we recorded live podcasts there on a studio sofa. And these have been recorded by the team doing the whole studio scene. And we are sharing these conversations now on the podcast. So I think it's better to watch, a better experience to watch this on YouTube. So just go to the Self-Recording Band and check it out there. Also, little heads up, save the date. Studioszene is happening again next year. We're going to be a part of that for sure again. They already invited us because, it just went very, very well. And it's going to be October 22nd to October 24th, 3 days in Hamburg. And so, save the date, get your tickets early. It's going to be bigger next year. It's already been amazing this year. And can't wait to be there again. All right. As always, I'm here joined by my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. How are you, Malcolm?
Hey, Benny, I'm great, man. Life is good back in Canada.
Yeah. You said you're not as jet-lagged as you were going to Europe so far, at least.
I don't know why that is, but we both came to the same conclusion because Benny came over to Canada for my wedding just earlier in the summer. And for whatever reason, going to Europe is way harder than coming from here. I was wrecked when I got to Europe, but I feel totally fine now. I think, we'll let the audience decide how intelligent I sound on this podcast, but I think I sound awake. I feel awake. It's good.
Awesome. Yeah, you look good. You're sounding and looking great. So absolutely good. I want to give a big shout out to our whole little team that we have here now. So Wayne, Thomas, Malcolm, you, all of you, this has been thank you for this week, and this has been such an incredible experience there. So thank you for all your hard work. I want people to know that everyone really worked hard, and it was just incredible. We filmed hours and hours and hours of content. We hung out at this cool houseboat with a built-in studio, and created some things there, and you're gonna eventually see all of this. So we're working our way through all this material and then release it for you guys. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you all, and it's been fantastic working with you.
If you're active in the Facebook group, or even better in Benny's coaching community, you've probably interacted with Wayne or Thomas, the other half of this team. But this was actually our first time the four of us were all in the same place ever. Which it never felt like that once.
No.
It was weird. I'd never met Wayne in person, and I met up with him before you guys picked us up at the Hamburg airport, and we were just hanging like we're chums for, our whole life. It was awesome. Loved it.
So, totally so cool. And also, if you are not already part of our community on Facebook or on our email list or in the coaching community, wherever, now is a good time to get in, because there's going to be collaborations happening from that Studioszene event. We're going to do a few exciting things. I can't tell you anything specific about it yet, but it's a good time to get in now, because things are growing, moving in the right direction. We're going to add a lot of new things, more value to our programs and to our community. And if you want to benefit from that and not miss it, then you want to be on our email list, and you want to be in the Facebook group and the Facebook community. So please do that. There's multiple ways to do that if you just check the show notes or the description below this video. And please become a part of our community here. Amazing. So this episode that we're sharing today is with Chris Yedda. This was still day one, I think, of the Studioszene event. This was the second interview we did. So Warren Hewitt was first, then Chris Yedda was the second one. Chris is the founder of and head basically of Audioscape. Audioscape make analog gear based on classic designs, and they it seems to be. I've tried a few of their things, and Malcolm, you did as well. I didn't try everything, but everything I've tried seemed to be really no compromise high end gear. But they make that accessible for people on a budget. It's obviously still not cheap because it's great gear, but compared to some of the originals, it's more affordable. And
Much
that,
more.
yeah, and his whole approach and that company's whole approach is really fascinating. It's built in the US. They have a team of, I think, 35 people, he was telling us.
I think it was 34, but
Well,
yeah.
it's 34, yeah.
34 people in Florida making this gear by hand, which is crazy that they can still make gear affordable with that setup. Like, I think both Benny and I are just total business addicts as well. So I think we could have a whole nother podcast just talking about how he runs his team, because that's so cool. But we didn't. This podcast is going to be much more interesting than that for everyone else. We talked about the creation of their gear, the mindset behind their gear, where analog fits in a modern world. You know, when there's digital versions of everything now, why does analog still have its place? And Chris is a great mind. He's a very inspiring person. I've used Audioscape stuff for years at a studio down the road, Silverside Sound. It comes up on this podcast all the time, I feel like.
It does.
But yeah, they got an LA2A and a 1176 Blue Stripe of Audioscapes there, and they're killer. They're great. That 1176 was active every session I was there.
Yeah, totally. I've had experience with their bus compressor, and then at Studioszene we got to try a new piece. I think it's not out yet, but I think they already shared some pictures of it, so it's also not a secret
there, right? So
yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah, so you'll see that, and if you go just to Audioscape, follow them on Instagram, because honestly, if you're looking into getting into buying the gear, you gotta be quick. You gotta catch their posts and then immediately order, basically, because they always run out quickly when they do their when they announce available pieces. And so I got to play around with, or we both got to play around with a new compressor that they have, and it, even in a setting like that trade show where noise in the background, unfamiliar headphones and all of that, we could still both tell that it sounded pretty damn amazing. The way it distorted, we are, Malcolm and I love making things dirty and fucking things up, basically, with gear, and that thing really did it in a very cool way. And so, my experience was entirely positive with all things Audioscape. And then also, although Chris obviously believes in analog gear, he's, again, not this elitist, person telling people like digital scrap or whatever. Not at all. Like, he's very open. He totally understands why people are using plugins. They even created plugins with, I think they partnered with Kai, right? And they have plugins now as well. So he totally understands both sides of it. But he thinks that analog has its place in the music production process. And we got to talk to him about this. We also talked about what to actually listen for when you compare analog to digital, what he thinks are the benefits. If someone's on the fence of getting into analog or wanting to try analog pieces, like, how do I even compare? What do I listen for? Where in the process, to apply these things, how to still make it, easy for you to recall your sessions, all of these questions that people usually have in terms when it comes to audio gear, to analog gear. We talked about all of that, and it's been a very, very good conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think you're going to love it. If you're ever at a studio recording conference and they're there, go stop by their booth. They're the nicest team of people. You're going to love them. So
yes.
You're going to enjoy this chat. It's, again, somebody that makes analog hardware, talking to Benny, who uses some analog hardware. He's got a hybrid mixer, and then myself, who uses none. So it's an interesting kind of triangle of different workflows, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Chris, for coming on, and enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records from your home studio or jam space. I'm your host, Benedikt Malcom. I'm here with my co-host, Malcolm Owen Flett from Canada.
Hello,
and we're live again from the Studioszene is what you actually call it, in Hamburg, Germany. And we're on the studio sofa that the guys from Sound and Recording let us use all week, which is really, really great. So thank you for that. So we're streaming live. It's very exciting. So if you're watching live, hello, thank you for joining us. And our guest now, which is very, very exciting, is Chris Yetta from Audioscape. They make great analog gear for recording studios. And we just had the chance to check some of that out, and it sounded incredible. And we have tons of questions. So thank you, Chris, for taking the time to do this with us. And welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. No, looking forward to it. And Thank you for all this space.
yeah, you get the couch
Yeah.
of honor, sir.
Yeah, exactly. So Malcolm, do you wanna start? Should I?
Yeah, well, I think right off the bat, Benny said that you make analog hardware for studios, but as we were preambling, you actually make hardware for artists and for musicians, and I think that's a really, really cool thing to talk about, the role of hardware and why it still exists and people still love it, even though there's unlimited plugins and software available now. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the place of analog hardware in the modern world.
I love this question. So a good way to look at it is, because we get this question all the time, and like we're talking about announcing a plugin, and it's one of those things where you could see a picture of a beautiful place, but it's another thing to go there and see it with your own eyes, right? And that's kind of like the same, that's kind of the analogy I would use with hardware. And, and a plugin is great, and it's modeling that one unit, but there are some variances that should be celebrated, in my opinion, when it comes to hardware. And when you have those variances, you have your own individual unit. It's part of your sound. And that's something that, yes, you can model that, turn that into a plugin if you want, but there's something to be said for having that unique individual art piece,
Absolutely.
is, kind of what we look at each unit that comes out, and we judge it that way accordingly. So, we always talk about building in small batches, and that's what we do. We sit and listen. Is this representation of what we want to go out in the wild and have people, use on their records? So, very conscious of all of that,
Absolutely. And I, like, the variances is a cool thing, because no matter how hard you were to try, every unit that leaves Audioscape's factory, and I understand they're all like hand built by you and your team in Florida, which is really, really cool. No matter how hard you try, they're going to be a little bit different every single time, right?
Certainly. Every unit is built end to end on site in Daytona Beach, Florida. There's about 35 of us now building all this gear, and yeah, if you're using the old components like carbon composition resistors, even some of the standard potentiometers have a 20% tolerance.
20%.
Yeah, and carbon comp resistors. I know you guys are into do-it-yourself. I'm sure you guys have used some carbon comp resistors, and as you heat them up, they drift.
Right.
They drift with heat. They drift with time. That's just part of what you accept. But to me, there's nothing that sounds like that in a tube circuit. Like, you can chuck metal film in there and be as clear, clinical and sterile as you want, but that's not what we're about. We accept those variances, we accept that, and that's part of the charm and part of the sound, that makes it unique.
Yeah, that's always funny when people, it's one of those things when people compare plugins to hardware, for example, and they always say like, it doesn't sound exactly like the hardware. I was like, if you took two of the hardware pieces and compared them, they wouldn't sound the same, and sometimes drastically different actually. So what do you compare it to? Like, it's just that one model that they modeled it off, and so yeah, it's part of what makes it exciting and interesting, right? This is the whole
and conversely, or not conversely, but you take two vintage units or 5, and they're all going to sound different.
Yeah, that's
they're going to have or 5 new ones even to a certain degree. It's What do
you think? Like, I know that a big part of our audience has never used analog gear, with the exception of maybe their interface preamps and the stuff that has to be analog. But if someone's on the fence and thinking about whether or not they should try and buy like an analog compressor, for example, and get into that and maybe use it instead of a plugin or on the way in the tracking chain, what would you say to someone who's like, I'm not sure if it's worth it. Like, how do I even hear the difference? Because they're probably going to buy it. It will sound great. They compare it to a plugin. They're not sure if it's really better because the differences can be subtle. Like, what would you tell a person? Like, what do you listen for? Where's the actual benefit? And how do I know if it's like, worth trying, or like all those things? Because I know that a couple of people like think about this and are not sure if they should get into it.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'd just say yes.
Yeah, of course.
Definitely do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the reason being is, aside from the sound you're going to get, the final product, the experience you get using hardware, and actually you start to understand the device more than just turning something on a screen. It's a whole different experience. It really is. And something interesting you brought up there is using it while tracking. And I know they're trying to approximate that, but there's something different that happens when you track with the compressor. Or, signal chains, changing, EQ after compression before, if you're doing that all live while you're going in and you're just committing, you know what your sound is and you commit. A lot of people that buy Audioscape gear, that's what they do. They track with this stuff. So there's really, then they ask us which one to use, and that's the hardest question to answer.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point, because so many people nowadays say, look, like so-and-so mixes in the box now. Jason Joshua, who we just were listening to a chat, apparently mixes all in the box now. But those songs weren't recorded all in the box. There was hardware committed in those decisions, in the tracking, that led to what they're now working with. Like, yeah, you can of course get great results in the box, but out of the box as well is still hugely in the equation.
Yeah, and at a certain point, it is about the people, whether it's about the people who are building the gear, whether it's about the people who are mixing and their skill set, and they know they've had enough hands-on experience with analog gear. They know how they can get that sound in the box. It's all part of the experience. There's I don't think there's ever any right or wrong way to do anything. It's just a matter of, preference for each individual person. And I don't feel like analog's ever going to really go away.
No.
Just like visiting beautiful places is never going to go away,
Yeah.
So,
and what would you specifically listen for if someone's like, I don't know, what will the benefit be because my plugin already sounds so amazing, and what would you think is the biggest benefit when it comes to let's say an analog compressor versus a plugin version? And I don't want to get into all of this, actually, not comparing to plugins, but in general, what do I listen for that and maybe if I don't have the trained ears or the experience already. So
there is a lot of nuance definitely involved in what we do, and even with what we listen for Final QC.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah. There is I don't want to get into the comparing plugins and generalizations, because that can get really tricky.
Yeah.
But I do notice differences in just saturation. Notice differences in, if we want to get really into it, stereo field. If you got a stereo device, stereo compressor, stereo reverb even, I've had, some people send me clips and I hear the difference in the stereo field on an iPhone speaker.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
They're like, that's okay.
Yeah.
But there is a place for, I guess some people describe it as three-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
Things sound more three-dimensional and real because they are.
Yeah, of course.
Go figure.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I feel like my experiences, and I have a bunch of really nice analog stuff as well in my studio, although I mix in the box, but I sometimes run stuff out through the analog gear, print it back in, so I don't have to deal with the recall, but I still have the sound. It's similar to reamping. That's what I do when I mix stuff. And what I feel like, the more, with some of those things, the more you push them, the more I like the analog version of it. So you can get away with subtle settings a lot of the time, but if I really push some compressors hard and get distortion out of them, that's where and I don't want to talk trash about or talk shit about any plugin, but that's where some of the plugins crap out and the analog
fall
things
apart.
And the analog things still does it, and in a very cool way.
That's actually what we listen for with our compressors, how we select the 6AQ5 and our Opto, our 2A style compressor, does it fall apart? Or does it do that rubber band effect that you're looking for and just grabs it and holds it, Yeah. So, you can hear that sometimes once you start pushing things, once you start boosting highs.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Now,
real quick,
Yeah.
If there's one benefit that I don't think gets talked about enough with hardware, it's that you can use the two hands at once. Yeah. You can change two knobs at the same time, and it's so amazing being able to adjust the attack and the release, or the input and the output, not having to turn up the compressor input, on a 1176, for example, and then it's getting louder, and you don't know if you actually made it better or not. And just being able to real-time adjust with two hands on a piece of hardware is life in, it's life.
Yeah, you can definitely reach a desirable result a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Once you get everything set up. It is like you guys are talking about with the boat studio, getting it all set up. Yeah. Take a day. But once you get it all set up, you're good to go,
Yeah.
One thing I do want to talk about is, you were talking about sending it out and then back in.
Yeah.
And I do a lot, something very similar. And I use, I don't want to, plug a friend's company or whatever, but the Flock Audio patch, I use that with our whole demo room setup.
Yeah.
And it's so easy and convenient because you have that modern convenience of a plug-in routing menu with all the gear. You can quickly, so you have all that convenience, but you're still using the hardware, and it sounds great. I don't hear like any, it's all digital with the switching, but it's all analog with the.
Are they here with their product?
I don't think so. We usually actually have them in our racks in the States.
Yeah. Too bad.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll check them out too.
Yeah. That sounds. Yeah, I love those solutions actually. Like you said, like the analog sound or like a certain thing we love, but then the convenience we expect these days when we work, like things have to be done fast and they have to be, you need to recall and best of both worlds.
There's some exciting things going on in the analog world, and that's one of them to me. Like that, it's worth mentioning that if you're used to that convenience of those plug-in menus, you can still get that with your analog setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So when you create a new design for a compressor, and that's based off of like a vintage piece basically, or inspired by a vintage piece, do you work off like just the schematics and then, or do you have an actual unit that you try to get as close as possible to, or like what do you do there?
That's a great question. When I started, I did not have a pot to piss in, so I would scrounge together money to buy, like with the Opto, I would buy like the original UTC iron, built it point to point like the original, just and then that was the God model. And then let's make a build, every single build that we make sound as good as this.
Right.
And that's what I did back then when I didn't have the money for original. Now we're a little bit luckier in the sense that we have people that support us. They'll send us stuff. They're like, do this,
All right.
So like for instance, Manny, who's with Produce Like a Pro as well, Manny Nieto, he sent us his 1178.
Oh wow!
And we use that as a model for our AS78. So like all like his same components, because they all vary. So like the same silver mica caps that are around the dual FET. We all the same half watt carbon film resistors. And then
did you ever get one that was broken, or like where you're like, I don't think we can model that the way it is?
Yeah, so, sometimes you break stuff. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like sometimes wires are real fragile, and then we gotta go fix it. But so and then there's like a lot of people that kind of beta test or they give us ideas. Like so during that dev process for the AS78, we had Ryan Hewitt reaching out. He was mixing like Unlimited Love back then for the Peppers' first album in a while, and he wanted like a 78 though, but he wanted like the blend control. He wanted some more sidechain high pass options. So that's something that we took into account. We added as well. So we do collaborate with artists and people, who they're just as passionate as us, basically.
Yeah. I guess they know what they're looking for, and that's got to be helpful, of course.
Yeah.
Now, is there a limit to like, because you could just add features, but I would assume there's a cost to doing that.
So one thing you'll notice about Audioscape products is that we don't add too many features because, there is, the more you add, you take away, right? So you have to be tasteful in what you're doing. So that's where, plugins can win. They can just go unlimited crazy with options. And I think that's cool and that should be celebrated. But with hardware, I think, sometimes there's a cost benefit analysis going on at all times during the dev process. Is this, you have to go back to like Rev 1 or Rev 0 after you've done a bunch of stuff and compare,
Yeah, totally.
That's a great point.
Going back to like being passionate about it, like you said before, and you can tell like you're really passionate about what you do. Is there a certain piece of gear you're working on now, or you have been working on that you're particularly excited about at the moment?
Yeah, there's we usually have 10 to 12 active products in development, and then whatever one sort of kind of comes together in a cohesive manner with all our available options and things that are going on. That's usually what I start focusing in and honing in our time on. There's probably like 3 or 4 that are really getting close right now. Obviously, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag
of course.
it, but there's a lot of exciting stuff going on, and there'll be more announcements. We have NAMM coming up in January. There'll be a big announcement there of another new product. So,
what's been the latest announcement that you can talk about already?
Well, we did announce just today the MK609. We've been in development on that since about 2020. Got an original friend of a supporter of ours, Earl Edgar from New Zealand, sent us his original metal knob 609.
Right.
And we just went to town. It's actually pretty complex circuit, more than you would think. And it took a while. It took a couple years to really, and there's not really, if you look online or anything, there's, schematics of, 609s, but there's not really a metal knob one. Mm-hmm. So we really had to just reverse engineer the build itself in that manner. And then also went to the trouble of molding the knobs, the original metal knobs, as, they're really hard to find, So the originals, I know there's not that many out there. They're like getting pretty rare. So, and it's a circuit that I feel like should be out there for people.
I hadn't even considered that you have to also figure out how to reproduce the look to some extent, right?
Oh, that's
a whole nother challenge.
Yeah. And luckily, we have Ryan Schmid, who's over there. He does all our mechanical designs. He's our head mechanical engineer. So when I first started, it was just like basic front panel, all that. And I was, now he's got 3D models and everything. You could see it from every single angle. And
very cool.
Yeah. And
long way.
Speaking of Ryan, he did the mechanical design for our ASA 6A, which we're releasing soon as well. That is like a mechanical feat. If you look at that, it's not like a traditional rack case. So if you
such a beautiful unit. We just got to look at it and also try it and listen to it, and it's like
Yeah, I was going to say, are we allowed to say that we saw it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Great. It sounds amazing. It sounds very.
And
very
it also
cool.
feels great and looks great. So back to the topic you were just talking about, like the way it looks and feels, the material it's built and everything.
Yeah, it's built just like the original back in 1951 with the umber gray, powder coat finish. It's got the hinge front panel. It's 5U in height. It's got all the original tube layout, new old stock tubes, all the original transformer layout. It's got like on the inside you could pull it out. It's like a 2-part case. It's got like the old amplifier kind of chassis that you see in the tray. Yeah.
It's so funny because our audience is probably confused by now, because on most of, we are almost 200 episodes into this podcast, and on most of the episodes we always tell people, like, use whatever you have, things are so available these days, and like, don't let the gear limit you and all of that. And we encourage people, of course, because we love that everyone can make their own records and everything. But now we're like talking about the analog gear, and I'm not gonna lie, I love gear, and I still have analog gear, and I get excited about it, and now I want one of those, that I just listened to. So it's like, that's the truth. It's still exciting. I don't think everyone has to have all those things, especially not when you're starting out. But at some point, you should at least try it and then make a decision for yourself.
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to pretend it's not exciting, because it is.
It's very exciting,
and I really think.
I mean,
cool.
You both touched on how hardware seems to take being pushed really hard way better than plugins, and that new ASA model is like we both, just the first thing we did is distorted vocals. It was like instantly throwing headphones, push it.
Immediately crank the input and like,
so good. And what's cool about that I think is relevant to our audience is that what people are sometimes worried about, like being too quantized or things being too perfect and not standing out, not having any way of being unique. And I think that is a really cool thing about analog gear, is that they're all different from each other, in some variances at least, and how you use them is also going to give a very different result. And it's like a cool way of kind of setting yourself apart. Like, I don't have anything that could sound like that new compressor of yours on a vocal. I cannot make that sound. If I could, I'd kind of have a different vocal sound going on than anybody else in my area. That's a pretty cool thing.
And also a good point there is like how you use it. I don't know exactly why that is, but I've always noticed that when I use analog gear, even if it would sound exactly the same as the plugin, like I use it differently.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, if I turn the knob on the screen, versus like grabbing the knob and maybe not even looking at it, I do different things with the hardware. I use it differently. So that is also something that I think
that's fascinating.
Has to be talked about in a way. And so totally agreed. It helps you be unique, stand out, do your thing, and maybe react more to the music. So.
And you guys mentioned that I'm passionate about this. I really am. Like, we're like kids in a candy store every day.
Would you like? Is that your experience as well? That you like whatever it is that you use it differently, maybe? Like,
certainly, yeah. Like, and sometimes I will compare something to a plugin. You just to be like, okay, there's maybe some weird quirk, and I don't have an original handy at the moment or something like that. And I'll be like, did they model this quirk? Am I, am I crazy? Is this what's going on? And yeah, it's handy. But yeah, as far as your question, yeah, definitely, 100%. It's always different, and there's still some nuance. Even if it sounds close, we add sometimes some options like like on the 6A, you can actually just have the grit with no compression.
Right.
So
I mean, very cool.
Yeah.
How would you sort of approach like implementing this into a modern like workflow? Would you run it as like plug-in inserts, like in and out of the computer in real time while you mix? Would you do the reamp thing where you print it? How would you go about like a recall? Because how it's like we sometimes work on like 10 songs at the same time, and then they need a fast revision, and then we need to recall all the things, and that's one of the reasons why people don't get analog gear, even though they think it sounds great. So do you take pictures? Do you have like recall sheets, like all of that? How would you personally approach
Well,
this?
I know we do offer a patch rat subscription for free to our customers, and that's kind of a more digital way of digital recall, but not it's like kind of like spec recall sheets, but just in your phone.
Yeah.
So we offer that. As far as how you use it, that goes.
Sorry, does that mean I don't know that thing? Does it mean I see the front plate basically, or like and I can turn knobs, or do I have to mark it like on a recall sheet, or like? It's just like a GUI of each front panel, and that's useful for. But to answer your question, that really depends on each individual user. I will say there is really what I love about these devices is you can't mess them up. Like they just sound great any way you use them. So you just. You're going to be better off plugging into any of these, than not doing it. So it's a great answer.
Yeah.
It's a great answer. Yeah, because it's this fine line, it's like efficiency is important in today's music production world, and being fast and intuitive, and like maybe the time you lose setting things up, maybe you save that because you mix more intuitively and faster, or whatever. Like so, yeah.
Yeah. In today's day and age, it is tough though. I feel that, but and sometimes people they want that convenience of digital recall on their device. I get that, but like on something like a 2A, like I'm sorry, like that's what, 2 knobs, guys? Like come on.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're in the wrong business if you need digital recall with that device. I'm sorry.
Very good point.
Be real.
Very good point. One other thing I want to bring up that you told us when we chatted earlier is that I think people might assume, okay, he likes analog hardware because he makes it, but you also have a plugin coming out.
We do. We think it would be something that would be useful in the plugin marketplace. We're not just going to do something that's been done a bunch from, like there's a bunch of 2A style compressor plugins out there. So our reverb is completely unique. So we're coming out with our XL305R reverb plugin, and we partner with Kive Audio doing this. And
Which make great plugins.
They make great plugins. Eddie is a wizard at what he does. We sent him the original XL305. If you guys aren't familiar with these reverbs, they're a little bit more obscure, but I worked with Wayne Kirkwood, who designed the original XL305 in the early 80s. Okay. And he helped us redesign it for the modern, for today. And it is a completely different device from the original one as far as it's got the same concept as far as the echo chamber and the way it's built and put together, but it's a completely like reimagined device. So very it's cool. Like what I describe as like the best general purpose spring reverb you could use all over your mix.
Awesome. And I think spring reverb is one of the most absent plugins, in my opinion. Like I don't actually own one that I really like right now, so I'm excited to try it.
Yeah, and it's cool because you can toggle between the original one and the new one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you can get you can hear how different they really are, and they're cool. They're both useful in their own right. So I think it's really cool. And we might do some different stuff with it as well in the future. So, things that go beyond what the hardware can do. Fantastic. Like we were talking about with plugins.
Yeah,
so.
Love it.
Totally. What would you say to someone who's trying to get, how did you get into this building things, and how did it all start? And that's interesting as well, because you are now you said you're 35 people or something. You're now very far from where you were at the beginning, probably, and you've come a long way. So how do you get into doing this, and how do you get to even understand all of this and be able to pull it off and create units that sound like that?
We Audioscape started in 2016. Before that, a lot of people don't know this. There was a company I did from 2010 to 2015 called CVC Pedals, and I built guitar pedals.
All right.
And I just build them in the garage and on Vero board or whatever. And I used to etch my own circuit boards, drill the holes, do all that stuff. That was fun. And we were semi-popular, we did some cool stuff, and it just got to a point where I was building the bus compressor for a producer friend of mine who's like, I'm all in the box, but the only thing I'd use is a bus comp, Yeah. So I was like, all right, I'll build you one. And then I was like, hey, this would be something I think people could use. Yeah. So Audioscape was born out of that one product, and then it just took off from there. And then I'd start getting pedal orders, and I'd throw them against the wall and be angry, because it's too much for one person to do 2 different companies. So Audioscape sort of took over, and then if you go on like the CBC pedals, like YouTube, you'll see people are like, I don't know what happened to this company. I think this guy's dead or in jail, or
just moved on.
No, we just moved on.
Yeah, totally. That's interesting. A great way to get into it, though, with starting with pedals, right?
Oh yeah, you can't hurt yourself that way. 9 volt. You're not going to really shock yourself too bad.
Very good point.
Yeah. So before we wrap it up here today, because we're coming close to the end of our slot here, how does the order process work, and then how do you get your hands on one of those products? Can I just go to the website at any point and just order it, and or how does it work?
So for the 260 VU and the bus comp, you can go to the website and just order. Mm-hmm. And there's a standard lead time, 2 to 3 weeks on each of those. Those are, we've sort of standardized our production with that to a point where we can do that. The other products like the Opto, we drop on Wednesdays and Saturdays, like the traditional model we started with, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then for the EQP and the AS78, there's a reserve list. So, and that we open up usually like every other Saturday, so people can jump on for that. And we are looking at doing some EU distribution with our friends at Session Desk as well, and having an EU website where there's some more agreeable times for our inventory updates. So people, it could drop 8 p.m. here, instead of 8 p.m. 6 hours, earlier.
and does that mean like you gotta be on it at that time, right? They don't last long. Right?
They don't. Sometimes it varies, different times of the year, certain products. But yeah, some of them like our Optos typically they're gone very quick, and people they email, I can't get it. You said it was going to be in stock. I was like, we just you get a run on them. But it's not like we're trying to do that on purpose. We have a lot of people working, and everybody's building that from Monday to Wednesday. And this is how many Optos we've built.
And it's hand built in the US. I mean, this is like
end to end. Yeah. We got. We have a girl showing up with a baby on one arm and a box of boards on the other on Fridays. Like that's this company. Yeah.
So cool. I love it. So, you guys have any questions here? Like anybody wants to ask Chris a question about any of the gear, or all good?
Do you have a question, Ryan?
Ryan. Yeah, ask Ryan.
Do you plan on bringing any pedals back?
That's a good one, actually. Yeah.
That is a good question, and we actually did bring one of the CBC pedals back.
Oh.
About a week ago, we did a drop on the Companion Plus.
What is the Companion Plus?
It's based off the old Shinai Companion Fuzz, which is excellent fuzz pedal for guitar, bass, anything. And
Malcolm's a big fan of fuzz pedals, I know that.
Yeah. So it's basically, it's got the old style circuit board, and it's got we use the original transistors that were in our original pedal from way back when. So we've sourced those. So it's just going to be like a limited run that we do on them. But yeah, it's fun. You can check it out if you go on the Audioscape website. There's actually a CBC pedals tab. So
all right.
Yeah, it's kind of coming full circle with that.
That's fantastic.
Well, thank you, Chris. This has been really fascinating, really interesting. Also, thank you for letting us use the gear and getting to hear it was really amazing. So where should we send people if they want to check it out? Is this the website? Is it audioscape.com? Is it your socials? What's the...
Audioscape.com, and also at Audioscape Audio on Instagram is usually the best place to find us.
Awesome. We're going to put that in the show notes as well. And then, we'll be back there tomorrow and on Thursday. I think I have to hear more of those
yeah, you do. Come on back.
Yeah, we'll be. Thank you for taking the time, Chris.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you guys for listening and then watching us live here. And and thank you for being here and listening to this. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
A big round of applause for Chris, please.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.